Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite the Assembly to turn to Agenda 14, Infrastructure for the Energy Transition, Utility for Net Zero Alliance. The Assembly has before it a background document with the same title, contained in A/14/DN/5. Central to the energy transition are advancement in power grids, requiring modernization for efficient integration and diffusion of renewable energy, and the establishment of robust hydrogen infrastructure, including pipelines, ports, and storage facilities, essential for the use of transport of green hydrogen. This Ministerial Roundtable on Infrastructure for the Energy Transition, Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, UNEZA, will serve as a platform for discussing the acceleration of net zero in the future, in light of the recent formation of Utility for Net Zero Alliance at COP28. The session will facilitate discussions among industry leaders, policymakers, and stakeholders, focusing on the development and optimization of essential infrastructure for the energy transition. I would now like to invite the Director General for his introductory remarks. You have the floor, Director General.
Distinguished Excellencies, leaders of our global utilities, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to welcome you to this Ministerial Roundtable on Infrastructure for the Energy Transition. Today's discussions hold profound significance as we collectively start the course toward a sustainable energy future. The outcome of COP28 has underscored the urgency of our shared mission. The commitments to triple renewable power capacity and double energy efficiency by 2030 represent ambitious yet essential milestones along the path to net zero emissions. This translates to an ambitious target of reaching over 11 terawatt of renewable power capacity by 2030, and this according to ARENA's tracking COP28 outcome report. And of course, we cannot overstate the utility sector's pivotal role in achieving these goals. However, achieving this ambitious target requires a fundamental transformation of our energy infrastructure. ARENA's seminal report tracking COP28 outcome, the Breakthrough Agenda Report 2023, and the World Energy Transition Outlook provide insightful analysis and a robust roadmap. They emphasize the need to build the infrastructure necessary to accommodate new renewable energy production centers, evolving trade partners, and changing demand locations. This includes modernizing and expanding electricity grids, integrating storage solutions, and ensures grid resilience. In this regard, I applaud the launch of the Utility for Net Zero Alliance, UNEZA. This initiative stands as a testament to the sector's growing recognition of its responsibility and transformative potential. UNEZA offers a vital platform for international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and identification of solutions to overcome existing barriers in the energy transition. I am inspired by the 27 leader global utilities and 5 partners organizations that have joined the Alliance. It's a recognition that achieving our climate goals requires unprecedented collaboration. I invite utilities from all ARENA members to join the alliance. The private sector, with its control of grids and power assets, holds immense potential to accelerate this transition. UNEZA, hosted by ARENA, represents a powerful convergence of expertise ready to drive tangible progress within the energy sector. This alliance will champion the build-out of clean power, modernization of the grids, ensuring our power system possess the flexibility and resilience to accommodate a high penetration of renewable generation. Energy efficiency is a fundamental imperative, and UNEZA member will prioritize solutions that minimize waste and optimize the value derived from each kilowatt hour. These industry leaders understand the necessity of decarbonization. They will spearhead investment in energy infrastructure, clean energy capacity and new technologies, systematically phasing out reliance on fossil fuels. The industry electrification offers a transformative solution, and this initiative will explore its potential to reshape sectors traditionally burdened by emission-intensive practice. UNEZA aims to address common challenges and barriers that stand on the way to tripling generation capacity in their respective country. UNEZA will deliver coordinated action directed towards catalyzed breakthrough essential for a sustainable energy future. Crucially, this company will engage policymakers in a collaborative effort, advocating for regulatory framework that accelerate and support this critical energy revolution. Let's champion these utility giants, recognize that their alliance is not just another corporate endeavor. It is a sign of a brighter, more sustainable tomorrow for us all. To realize UNEZA's full potential and leverage the opportunity identified by ARENA analysis, we must therefore prioritize infrastructure, policy, workforce development, and institutional reform. This requires streamlining regulatory framework, channeling targeted investment, and rapidly upskilling the workforce to meet the demand of the transformation energy landscape. UNEZA's success depends on addressing key challenges, mobilizing helpful low carbon capital, mitigating supply chain risk for clean energy technology, and crafting supporting policy environment. To overcome this obstacle, UNEZA will engage in close collaboration with ARENA, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion, TACA, and SSE as the two co-chairs of the Alliance and strategic partners. This will enable vital knowledge sharing and facilitate critical public-private consultations for success. So, ladies and gentlemen, the energy transition is not just a technical challenge. It is a collective endeavor that requires sustained commitment and collaboration from all stakeholders. The leadership demonstrated by the utility sector through UNEZA is a powerful signal of the industry's commitment. By working together, mobilizing resources, and implementing the action outlined in the veto and the UAE consensus, we can achieve a sustainable energy future for all. From its launch announced at COP28 till today, UNEZA has developed a strategic roadmap and plans of action directed at improving international collaboration in the power sector, contributing to tripling generation capacity by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050 at latest. I am confident that with the combining expertise and unwavering resolve of the utility sector, governments and international organizations, we can unlock the full potential of UNEZA and transform the vision of net zero future into reality. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director General, for your remarks. I now invite Mr. Jassim Tabet of TACA and co-chair of the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance to deliver his address.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, IRENA Director General, Mr. Francesco Lecamari, for the opportunity to address the Assembly today and for the ongoing support of this initiative. Also, I'd like to thank the Utilities Net Zero Alliance members for their commitment towards navigating the energy transition in a collaborative manner. The whole idea of the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance was born during the World Utilities Congress in May 2023 in Abu Dhabi, where fellow CEOs identified an urgent need for collaborative action in this industry. Post this, the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance was officially launched during COP28, where the members signed a declaration of action with a clear objective to strengthen the cooperation within the power sector and align behind the agreed goals during COP28 to triple renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency gains by 2030. Since then, the Utilities Net Zero Alliance members have been working extensively and closely together along with IRENA to develop a tangible roadmap and action plan with an initial phase covering for the next 2 years, which will be presented in some detail by IRENA today. Also, just taking a step back and maybe just setting the scene a bit. Just before COP28, the International Energy Agency said by 2040, the world would need to build or replace 80 million kilometers of power grids globally. That's equal to all the grids we have today. In other words, this means rebuilding a power system that took 100 years in less than 1/5 of this time. Also, I'd like to highlight that it will require an annual grid investment to nearly double by 2030 to over $600 billion per year, after roughly a decade of stagnation at the global level. On a separate note, despite the challenges associated with the grids, the utilities community continues to invest heavily in renewables. For instance, the Alliance members collectively reaffirmed their commitment to increase the combined renewable capacity to 750 gigawatts by 2030. And that is close to 2.5 times their joint capacity today. I'd also like to emphasize that we need to do more than that. We need a Marshall Plan for power infrastructure development. And that is not an exaggeration to say that we literally need to rewire the energy system today. Also, I'd like to highlight that this plan is an ambitious plan, that we cannot achieve it unless we do it collectively. And that is why this kind of alliance is a first step and a key step in doing that. So, can the UNEZA or the Utilities for Net Zero, how can the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance help? I'd like to remind everyone here that the members have collectively put forward an action plan aimed to addressing the key challenges the sector is facing. I'd also like to share that the key focus areas of the plan over the next 2 years will be around building up a reliable and flexible grid infrastructure, given the urgency and the high complexity and the high ecosystem impact around it. In addition to building out clean power, which are both strongly interconnected. Also, I'd like to highlight, to solve the main challenges related to the expansion of the power grids all around the world, the Alliance will take concrete steps across 3 pillars. First, working with supply chain partners to enable them to expand production to ease the current capacity constraints. Secondly, working with policymakers and regulators to ease the gridlock in many parts of the world when it comes to the permitting process and to make it easier. And finally, working harder together with financial institutions to mobilize capital. In summary, I'd like to highlight that the efforts, as per the action plans, are just the beginning. This is a challenge for the whole world, and it requires a collective action across industries and governments. And we are proud for TAQA to stand alongside our peers from across the global utilities industry and this alliance. And I would like to also emphasize that collective action as an industry can and will make a difference. So to conclude, thank you everyone for all the support that we've received.
Thank you, Mr. Fabet, for your remarks. I now invite Mr. Martin Iboth, Chief Commercial Officer of SSE and co-chair of the Utility for Net Zero Alliance, to deliver his address.
Thank you so much, and I'd like to thank Irena for the opportunity to address the Assembly. I'd also like to thank my colleague and co-chair, Jazim Farbet of TAQA, and acknowledge everything in his address as powerful, cogent, and very relevant to all of us. I'd also like to acknowledge the work by Irena and TAQA to establish the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance and build on the positive initial launch at COP28. We at SSE are delighted to be co-chair of UNEZA alongside TAQA and to see such a diverse and accomplished group of utilities coming together to tackle the biggest problem of all. And I would echo previous comments about the significance of the Alliance and the work we have set out to do, but in the interest of time, I will focus my brief remarks on a specific work stream which is now underway on supply chains. For those who don't know us, SSE is a UK-based integrated utility helping drive the energy transition across all parts of the electricity value chain. We are predominantly active in the UK, and we have the privilege of owning legacy assets and being the custodians of some of the biggest prospects in the UK for net zero, and we are investing across the train in terms of renewables, transmission and distribution. We're in the midst of an investment programme through which we will invest well in excess of £40 billion over the next 10 years in renewables, but also in renewable enabling technology. As Jazim mentioned, flex grid infrastructure and also flex power solutions are going to be critical in this. And this has seen us building and having the privilege, actually, of building as much offshore wind farm as anybody right now, including the largest offshore wind farm in the world at Dogger Bank. And that offshore wind, which has been a major success story in the UK, has also been the engine behind its achievements in decarbonising its power sector at a decent rate. And there are many positive lessons to take from this, including the value of long-term government commitments enshrined in good law and innovative policy mechanisms to de-risk investments and lower the cost of capital. There is, however, a cautionary tale. Despite leading the world in offshore wind within the UK, this is not necessarily leveraged enough to be able to build domestic supply chains due to the slightly piecemeal nature of auctions and perhaps the overemphasis on short-term marginal cost rather than wider value. And for us all to achieve our ambitions, this just simply can't continue. We know that building a resilient, sustainable supply chain will be critical if we are to achieve a trebling of renewables by 2025. That is why UNEZA is focusing its early attentions on this very issue, and I'm delighted that we are looking at publishing a paper outlining a series of practical recommendations to policymakers. And particular thanks should be mentioned to Hitachi Energy and the GRA for their efforts in helping this. If I may end on a note of optimism, we can already see change coming, some of the change Jazim has mentioned. On grids, just such a key enabler of trebling renewables. In our markets in the UK, for example, we're seeing a much longer-term anticipated regulatory package, more strategic in its nature, being set out in a more planful way. And this long-term certainty is giving key supply chain partners the visibility they need to invest in new facilities. On offshore wind, we're seeing governments around the world taking a more holistic view of wider energy system and socio-economic value when designing their auctions. And we hope that these trends continue and accelerate, and along with all of our shared commitment to trebling renewables by 2030, will act as a critical catalyst for supply chain investments, and that the recommendations we're collectively setting out will make a meaningful contribution to that effort. I thank you for listening to me, and I thank you for your time. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peaboth, for your remarks. Before I give the floor to Mr. Gonul for the scene-setting presentation, I would like to draw your attention to the screen where a video will be shown highlighting challenges and opportunities to collaborate on energy transitions, tripling renewables, and doubling energy efficiency. I would like now for the video to be shown. Thank you for the video. I now invite Mr. Kunul, Director of Country Engagement and Partnerships at the IRENA, to deliver a scene-setting presentation.
Thank you, Chair, distinguished ministers, Commissioner, members and partners of UNEZA, dear guests. So it's really a great pleasure to be here with you today and set the scene for the discussion by providing a bit more details on the alliance. Accelerating the energy transition is an urgent task that requires radical action and extraordinary levels of international cooperation. UNEZA is an international platform for cooperation among entities operating within the power utilities ecosystem to address and overcome common barriers to the realization of net zero ambitions and near-term emission reduction targets. International cooperation and enduring partnerships with all stakeholders are essential to accelerate the transition towards net zero. IRENA hosts the Secretariat and fully supports the UNEZA, together with UN high-level climate change champions, as well as TACA and SSE as the two co-chairs of the Alliance. 34 partners, including 28 global utilities and power companies that collectively serve around 300 million customers, united for a landmark joint commitment to advance electrification, renewables-ready grids, and clean energy deployment in line with 2030 breakthrough goals and a net zero future by 2050. Today, UNEZA launches its roadmap to 2030 and beyond to address key challenges and expanding impact beyond UNEZA in 3 key steps. Accelerate the transition through stronger international collaboration in power sector, collectively contribute to tripling renewables power and doubling energy efficiency by 2030, and reach net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. The members of the UNEZA have individual plans that collectively aim at achieving a joint target of 749 gigawatt of renewables to be deployed by 2030, which corresponds to 2.5 times increase compared to their current installed capacity. This significant target is impressive, but still falls short compared to the pledge on tripling renewables. I hope that today, during our discussions, we advance our collective thinking. What must be done to support UNEZA members on the tripling target? Moreover, system operators within the UNEZA membership are committed to significant investment programs to reinforce, digitalize and modernize the grid infrastructure, at least in line with the global benchmark of doubling by 2030. The members aim to significantly increase investments in grids, which would require strong cooperation among different stakeholders. Within this year, a number of specific quantifiable additional targets will be defined. Having such global targets is important, but we also have to be aware that country level and regional differences are significant, thus delivering local solutions, tailored solutions are crucial. Here shows the priority challenges of UNEZA for 2024-2025 across the key focus areas and pillars. In the next 2 years, the focus will be on build-out of clean power and reliable and flexible grid infrastructure along the key pillars to facilitate policy and regulatory support, mobilize capital, and the risking of supply chains, and improving capabilities and skills. UNEZA will follow a two-step approach to accelerate the transition towards net zero by building the fact base on what needs to be done and then driving corresponding actions within the alliance and implementing projects on the ground. Aligned with this approach, UNEZA today published on its website a detailed plan of actions for 2024-2025. It aims to support 2030 energy transition ambition through their global infrastructure program that will drive grid infrastructure investments to support tripling and beyond by 2030. The focus will be to drive supply chain capacity expansion for grid development and ease constraints, engage policy and regulatory community to ease bottlenecks and simplify permitting, mobilize capital to modernize and build out infrastructure for the energy transition. The UNEZA plan of actions will lay the foundation for the needs of the future energy system, focusing on grids and the key challenges it faces while increasing clean energy capacity. UNEZA's actions will build on various initiatives implemented by its members and partners. UNEZA has been working on detailed high-level statement on building a resilient and diverse clean energy technology supply chain that will be published soon. Today, I would like to share with you some key messages and recommendations from that statement. I will focus on some of the key recommendations in each specific area of grids and renewable energy technologies. On power grids, it is important to have a functioning global supply chain manufacturers of critical grid technologies to leverage their resources across the world. Longer-term strategic power system plans developed on a regional basis are required. Bringing a shift from single project approvals to multi-projects and permitting approvals are extremely important. Any disruptions to land, sea, or air infrastructure, such as due to changing climate conditions or geopolitics, will create a ripple effect across global supply chains. For wind energy, regionalization is one of the key issues to support growth and resilience while maintaining a globalized wind supply chain. For solar energy, resilient diversified and low-cost global solar value chains should be developed as a priority to safeguard against market and price shocks. Value chain localization efforts must be tied to the need for globally integrated and diverse supply chains. When it comes to hydropower, UNEZA is recommending to scale up a mature supply chain, decarbonize materials like steel and cement used to build hydropower dams. For energy storage, the industry calls that cross-sectoral and power system harmonized investment needed along with the diversification of storage technologies and skill development. So let me conclude the presentation by saying together we can deliver and join our forces to build the fact base and foundation towards a net zero future. I take this opportunity to invite all IRENA members as their utility companies to join this powerful cooperation platform of UNEZA. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Gonul, for this insightful presentation. During the Ministerial Roundtable, we will hear insight from a high-level panel of speakers on the subject matter. The discussion will be moderated by Ms. Melinda Crane, lead moderator of the talk show To the Point. Ms. Crane is also a Berlin-based moderator and a political commentator with a background in law and economics. The panel discussion will be followed by member interventions. Let me now hand over to our moderator. Over to you, Ms. Berlin.
Thank you very much, dear Chair. Thank you also to Director Gonul for that very ambitious vision and plan of action that you've outlined. I'm getting out from behind this desk so that I can greet our panelists properly. And also say to all of you, dear excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. It's a great honor to moderate this discussion. So as we've heard, UNEZA is about collaborative action now to achieve that massive infrastructure buildup that was described by our opening speakers. And UNEZA brings together a lot of power, and I do intend that pun. Nonetheless, this is not something UNEZA can do alone, and all of our speakers have made that clear. When you talk about collective action, you mean also collective action between industry and policymakers. And we've tried to mirror that with our panel here today. We have leaders from both industry and government. Along the way, we got a few more policymakers, and it looks like we may have lost one of our industry representatives. But if we add the co-chairs from whom we just heard, we are nearly at parity. So at least when it comes to public-private. Where we're not so good in parity is on the gender side, but the Commissioner and I are going to do our best to take care of that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel. We are running behind, as you can all see, so I'm going to say before we even begin, I'm very grateful if everybody can keep their answers short. We're going to do 2 rounds of questions about different stakeholder responsibilities, policy and industry, and then we're going to open the floor to pre-registered interventions. If we have time, I will also take non-pre-registered interventions, but I'm kind of doubtful that we will have time. So let me now introduce our panel, starting with EU Commissioner Kadri Simpson. She is Commissioner for Energy, responsible for implementing the European Green Deal in the energy sector. And seated next to her is His Excellency State Secretary Stefan Wenzel, State Secretary at Germany's Federal Ministry of Economy and Climate Action. Next to him is Excellency George Papanastio. He is Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry for the Republic of Cyprus. It's also a pleasure to introduce Philippe Henry. He's Minister of Climate, Energy, Mobility and Infrastructure for the Walloon region of Belgium. And Then next to him is Mr. Luc Raymond. He's CEO of the French power company EDF, and its subsidiary EDF Renouvelable is a major global player in the renewable sector. So welcome to all of you. Great to have you with us. And I'd like to try to tie together some of the things that you are doing with the messages that we have just heard from Director Gonul on the vision and plan of action of UNEZA. And I'm going to ask, as I said, that everybody keep their answers brief, which means under 3 minutes, please. Very grateful to you for that. And if you can share concrete best practices and examples, that would also be great, because plan of action, of course, means right now. What are we doing? So, Commissioner Simpson, following the energy crisis, and you talked about this already a little bit in earlier sessions today, the EU put into place the Repower EU plan, along with a new legislative framework for supporting renewable infrastructure, and also the EU action plan for grids. When you hear what UNEZA is telling us, what do you see as the most crucial aspects of those various instruments when it comes to achieving this kind of an infrastructure build-out?
Let me start also by congratulating UNEZA for a very good action plan. And I think that it is important to map what is our starting position. So right now, entire existing global grid is 80 million kilometers long, and that means that if we want to accelerate electrification, we need to double it by 2040. And already now, we are in this situation that worldwide we do have at least 3,000 gigawatts of renewable projects that are waiting in grid connection queues. So from European perspective, I can say that, that electricity grid in Europe is more resilient and flexible than any system across the globe. And we do have a very dense network of 11 million kilometers. But we are in this position where we will also electrify sectors which were until now heavily dependent on fossil fuels. We have to make it possible to replace Russian fossil fuels with alternatives, greener alternatives, and that means that despite the fact that so far grids are a true European success story of integration and cooperation, we need to expand our grids, and 2/3 of investments will go to the distribution side. So 40% of our distribution lines are older than 40 years old, and we will electrify the heating sector. We will bring online electric vehicle chargers, so this is a massive challenge. And we have organized our action around 3 actions. I think that it is most important that, that we have to address 2 main issues in parallel. First, the significant ramp-up of grid technologies production, and second, deployment of grids so that infrastructure investments go in parallel with renewable deployment. And for that, we presented our grids action plan. This consists 14 very concrete actions that we have to deliver within 18 months, so very short time frame. We also addressed in our Net Zero Industry Act some key technologies. And I think that it is very important that this is not only about renewables, wind and solar and geothermal, but it also includes grid components because this is one of the bottlenecks now. And then, of course, we revised our framework for trans-European energy networks, just to connect our own member states, but also our neighbors. And that gives them also boost to bring online more renewables because they know that there is a market case. And my last comment is that you don't see many energy ministers from European Union around the table, but just this Monday we had informal meeting, 27 ministers were there, and we dedicated a day and a half discussing exactly the challenges that we are faced in infrastructure side of our energy policy.
We do have one of those European energy ministers at the table today, and in fact, he'll tell us about it. One of the biggest important projects of common European interest there is working on the kind of interconnectors that you described. But first, I'm going to go to State Secretary Wenzel, and Germany aims to generate 80% of its power from renewables by 2030. That is quite a short period of time. Your minister, Robert Habeck, has said that grid expansion is going to be absolutely key to achieving that goal. What exactly is your government doing to accelerate the needed infrastructure build out in this very, very short time period? And what do you need from other key stakeholders?
Yeah, thank you very much, Melinda, for this question. We are working on the grid, on our infrastructure since 10 years, and now we want to go faster ahead with our grid because it has a crucial role for energy security and to implement 80% of renewables. And for example, we simplified and facilitated the permitting process of building infrastructure and grids. An example, the deployment of renewables now is by law of overriding public interest. That's one point. And we have a quite clear plan for the expansion of transmission lines, but also for the strengthening of the distribution grids. And we clearly monitor our progress in grid expansion. And that's a huge challenge, but we are working also on digitalization of the grid. That is a very crucial point too. And we invest into all kinds of flexibilities, be it storage or demand-side measures, using the storage option of electric vehicles or the storage option of heat pumps, because every heat pump, for example, comes with a storage of water, so we can use it in the midday when we have a lot of sun. We take the sun and store it in the water storage of the heat pump, use it in the evening, and so flexibility is very important.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad you mentioned the designation of renewable energy projects as projects of public interest, because we're talking right here about collaboration between policymakers and industry, but bringing the public along is obviously very, very crucial indeed, because massive amounts of taxpayer money will be spent to achieve these projects. And so with that, I will now go to Cyprus, which in fact is a country that is looking to spend quite a bit of public monies on a new interconnector. You mentioned it in the earlier session on the geopolitics of energy. Cyprus is advancing what's now called the Great Sea Interconnector. It started out as the Eurasia Interconnector that is essentially a 1,000 megawatt undersea cable that will connect Greece, Cyprus, and the Israeli power grids. And as I understand it, that remains an important project of common European interest as it began under the Eurasia name. So tell us how you see your government's role in ensuring that this project goes forward in particular, and also in accelerating that build-out of infrastructure in general.
Thank you, Melinda. Before I go to the interconnection, I would say that Cyprus has an isolated energy system, and without any electricity interconnection so far to any other country, that creates certain difficulties for the penetration of renewable energy sources. You understand that it's a very niche market, so whatever we produce, we need to consume it. The Cyprus is sitting in the middle of the Mediterranean, or in the very east of the Mediterranean, with a very high solar dynamic. So you understand we are blessed from that point of view, so that we can make use of the renewables and more specifically solar. On the wind dynamic, Cyprus is not so blessed, simply because we don't have the high winds, even offshore. So electricity interconnection, which is your question, generally are vital in managing the intermittent nature of renewable energy sources, and boost the security of energy supply. Additionally, electricity interconnections allow cross-border access for new producers and suppliers. In fact, what we are trying with the interconnector, the new name is Great Sea, as you very rightly pointed out. It's a project which connects Israel, Cyprus, and Crete. And Crete is already connected with mainland Greece, and mainland Greece with the rest of the European electricity grid system. It's a very ambitious project, simply because not only is 879 kilometers between Cyprus and Crete, it is also laid, the cable, it's laid at the depth of 3 kilometers. 3 kilometers depth, so you need specific technologies in order to deliver such projects. And in fact, there is one company that produces such cables, and this company on its own cannot deliver the cable for these depths, and this cable needs to receive an extra technology in another country, namely in Japan, in order to get the cable ready to be laid at a depth of 3 kilometers. It's a 1,000 megawatt project, cable. It will increase the penetration of renewables in the country, but also it will create a system of electrons flowing from Cyprus to Crete, from Crete to Cyprus, or Israel to Cyprus. So Cyprus will be sitting in the middle of this electrons flow, which gives the security of supply that the country is looking for. But also the importance is the penetration of renewables.
Thank you very much. And let me go on now to Monsieur Henry. And a similar question to you, if I may, given that Belgium is well integrated into Europe's energy infrastructure and has set ambitious targets both for offshore wind and solar PV. How do you see the roles of different stakeholders, including government, in accelerating infrastructure build-out?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to fully support and welcome the recent formation of this Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, platform for discussing the acceleration of a net zero future among utilities can certainly play a role in unlocking their transition potential. I think the main challenge for public authorities to succeed in the energy transition is the financing of networks and interconnection of networks, micro networks, micro and macro networks, and financing of infrastructure on the one hand, and innovations, smart meters and so on the other end. The deployment of electricity transmission and distribution networks can be crucial for realizing our goals. A stable and ambitious framework is necessary to align also private investments with the energy transition. I think public investments could focus on building infrastructures such as hydrogen and electricity grids, as well as fostering innovation and upscaling of breakthrough technologies. And the main current problem is the speed at which the electricity network should develop to meet the growing demands on injection, connection of renewable productions, and the growing needs for electricity from electric vehicles and heat pumps. In Belgium, also, the main obstacle to accelerating the development of networks is the lack of manpower. That's an important point also to mention. And I also have to add the fact that energy efficiency is also very important. It's not only a prerequisite for the energy transition, but also make it possible to optimize infrastructure. So I think it's very important to have collaboration at international level and also internal level to facilitate such approach, such holistic infrastructure planning, information sharing between the various players across the sector, the energy sector and beyond is essential. The more information the network operators have about the client's energy transition plans, the more efficiently they can anticipate the necessary grid in the international connections and in the internal connections. That's why, for example, we have collaboration in Belgium between TSO and DSO, the grid and the transport grid also. And then to conclude that, like with this, I think at international level it's the same. We have to interconnect and invest the most quickly possible.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to hydrogen a little bit later on because I know Belgium has aspirations there. And I'm glad that you mentioned labor shortages, the shortage of skilled labor, because that in fact is a key issue here, and we will be addressing it tomorrow in a plenary. So I warmly invite anyone interested in that topic to join us tomorrow for our plenary. Let me come now to industry. We've heard about some different things that governments are doing. You at EDF have big ambitions for renewables and infrastructure build out. Tell us a little bit more about what you expect from governments, from policymakers. I know Director Gonel has covered some of it, as have SSE and Taka, but perhaps you can share your own point of view, as well as what you yourselves are doing at EDF.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Well, EDF is indeed a utility, as its name since a long time. Not necessarily means everything everywhere the same word, but basically means that at least in 4 countries in Europe, we are delivering both generation and a commercial capacity serving customers, 30 million of customers overall. What makes us a special utility is that the power we deliver is over 91% low carbon already. And of course, we are delivering this 24/7. In these countries, plus operating in 30 other countries. The ambition of EDF, of course, is to go more in the direction of net zero, and as fast as we can. Today, we are at a level of 37 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, and we ambition to be at 22 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour in 2035. To give you just a benchmark, in Europe, the average gram of CO2 is 251. So this is where we start from, but we want to go farther. There are many challenges, of course, to go in that direction, but the more you advance in the direction of net zero, the more you face systemic topics. And I think this is where most of our countries are now bound to, which is, yes, we need to add more of everything, but at some point we need to face the challenges of the system. And this is where we are. Electricity works as a system from generation to the usage. And we need to have a comprehensive and resilient system. And I just want to share a few elements and few ideas in this direction, very short. First, there will be more instability coming. The estimate we have is ×3 instability in the electrical system by 2030. We need to swallow this. Yes, we need more renewable. Yes, we need more grid. But once you have reached the level of renewable that can be swallowed by the demand at a given moment when you have production, you need to add dispatchable power, storage, and flexibility. And we need to work as much on these aspects. Yes, we need to work on the grid so that we can share more electricity across distances, but there are technical aspects which cannot be solved even with bigger pipes. Instability locally needs to be treated as well. So, in short, to answer to your questions, what do we expect from government? We expect judgment and balance, and also efforts to understand the physical dimensions of electricity that are more stubborn than any kind of law. They are physical laws. That's where we expect to give advice to the government and then to follow their steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reminding us of the importance of physics. Much appreciated. We now have a second round of questions. I'm going to ask everybody to try to keep your answers to 2 minutes, if you can, so that we can still take floor interventions. I think we hear the cocktail party gearing up outside, but let's forget that. Let's stay right here with UNEZA and the matter at hand. So I'd like to take a deeper dive now on how we unlock the utility sector's potential to accelerate the energy transition, particularly by overcoming structural and financial impediments, all of which have been mentioned so far. And again, I'll begin with you, if I may, Commissioner. As we've heard, unlocking that potential does require a significant surge in financing for infrastructure. You reminded us this morning that many governments do face some pretty severe budget constraints at this time. What is the EU doing to leverage the financing that will be needed within Europe and beyond Europe, of course?
Indeed, even within Europe, we know that to build up our grid infrastructure, we need 500 billion euros only this decade, and it's clear that we cannot take it from consumers, we cannot add it to the tariffs. So some significant public support is needed. And we address this issue in our grids action plan. So there is a challenge how to build out grid that will connect future offshore wind farms with mainland consumers. Also how to connect our still isolated island member states like Cyprus or Ireland. And there is a challenge that we have to give a clear signal also for the subsea cable producers. Right now in Europe, they are producing approximately 1,900 kilometers, but we need 3,200. So this is one of the actions just to give predictability what kind of demand for their production is there. Another challenge is, and I very much agree that we do have impressive grid infrastructure already, but we need to smarten it, just to allow thousands, millions of small producers to become prosumers so that they will produce some for their own consumption, but will be able to sell it also to the grid. And for that, we also will give visibility for funding from EU programs for smart grids and modernization of distribution grids. So we do have different EU funds available, regional development funds, but I think that the latest edition came online with a plan that we wanted to address the COVID impact by bringing online additional financing. We call this Next Generation EU program, and there member states can use these funds exactly to strengthen the distribution grid. And on top of that, because we do believe that cross-border interconnections will allow us to bring more renewables online, and many member states and our neighbours will benefit out of it, but there is always a challenge who will cover the costs, because some member states might be the beneficiaries and others producers. Then for that occasion, we have created Connecting Europe facility, where we can also cover the necessary costs. And now this facility is also open for our neighbours. So not only this project that will connect Cyprus with Israel, but also projects that will connect Italy with Northern Africa, or even our Romania via Black Sea subsea cable towards Georgia and Azerbaijan. And by doing so also with vast potential of Caspian Sea.
Thank you very much. And back to State Secretary Wenzel. And we've heard it mentioned that, in fact, this grid build-out, it will look different from the grids of the past. We're going to have to see a lot more investment in distribution, for example, because of the decentralized and local nature of renewables. Again, massive investments are going to be required. Share some best practices about how Germany is trying to unleash the utility sector's potential to generate those kind of funding.
At one point we must see in the future, we will support with the grid also mobility, housing. It's sectors which are now living from oil and gas, and this grid had much more work to do in the future. So that one reason, too, why we must invest. And the first is policy work. We must have a reliable framework. That is very important also to have bankability for the investment, for private money also. And we need a reliable framework that means every consumer and every company that produces renewable electricity can feed the electricity into the grid and receive remuneration. And grid operators should grid the grid in such a way that flexibility is supported and various storage facilities are well utilized, and then we can work good together with our neighbors in Europe, but also in North Africa or the MENA region in the future. And electricity prices for consumers must cover the cost of its production. That's it's an important point too for bankability. But with renewables, we can have a far lower cost in the future than with fossil fuels. And second, we need a planning security, a long-range planning security, and our new NDCs would be a part of this planning security because they determine what a country wants to do in the future. And then we must talk about financing, how we can use die-risk mobility, die-risk options in even in countries with very high interest rates, very high inflation or other economic risk. And we must see at social acceptance. Social acceptance is always a very important point.
Thank you very much for underlining that. Minister Papanastio, that Great Sea interconnector that we talked about comes with a pretty substantial price tag, of course. How are you working with private sector partners, including utilities, to get the kind of capital investment that you need?
Yes, the project, I would like to thank Kadri for providing it's a PCI, it's a project of common interest, so Kadri has been generous enough to give a few hundreds of millions on the project. The total cost is estimated at 2 billion, and for the Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus is a small country, you understand, and the financials are also small. However, the connection makes a lot of sense in terms of reducing electricity prices in the country. And the project promoter currently is IPTO, which is the transmission operator of Greece, will be out shortly in order to receive interest from potential investors. And one of the interested parties is also TAGA. We recently signed an MOU, which partly is binding, or it's a gentleman's agreement as well, that we will join forces in order to deliver this project of the 2 billion project. However, the value and the value is so high that I believe the project attracts already investors and utility companies as well. But it makes a lot of sense geopolitically because that particular interconnector goes as far as Israel, and you understand that there will be potential for connecting Europe with Saudi Arabia at some point in time.
Thank you very much. Minister Henry, I know that Belgium has aspirations to be a green hydrogen hub. So I wonder how you see the role of utilities in that endeavor. What are you looking for from them in terms of collaboration, and how are you incentivizing that?
Effectively, we are working on the hydrogen too, and it's directly linked to renewables, of course, because it's an objective of developing green hydrogen. Therefore, we have to organize the ecosystem about hydrogen. We are now we have organized a council in Belgium about hydrogen. We have projects in several ports, in Antwerp, in Liège, where we can have together some production, some consumption, and develop the facilities and the knowledge about hydrogen, because it's a completely new subject. So it's much work, and it's also necessary that the countries invest and support research and infrastructure. Of course, there are also the pipelines about that. So it's completely directly linked. But of course, we have together to develop hydrogen and electricity grid, because it will be together for making green hydrogen. And I wanted to also to insist on the question of flexibility for electricity. The commissioner spoke about the prosumers, and it's in fact a very important subject we have at the moment in Wallonia, because the grid was not ready that far, and that's why we have to work on the flexibility for all producers and also consumers. And if we succeed in displace the demand in the time you consume electricity when it's produced, for the prosumers but also for the other people, it will completely help the grid. So that flexibility on the electricity and the development of the new vectors like hydrogen, that are the main things on what we are working now.
Thank you very much. And to EDF, one last question before we open the floor. When it comes to unlocking the utility sector's potential in order to ramp up infrastructure build out, do you have best practices, examples that you could share? You don't have to name names of governments or countries or organizations, but are there particular examples where you would say this was really key, this really worked well?
Sure, of course. Well, I think, as for any company, what matters the most is the visibility of the conditions of your operations for the long run. So clearly, we are in most countries, we are operating in an energy-only market, which is quite unstable, with a lot of flexibility, a lot of volatility on the electricity price. This, as such, is a handicap for investment, because you cannot predict your sales output. So there are ways to handle that have been developed, notably in Europe over the years. I would like to congratulate the European Commission and the governments for coming together last year with an agreement which I think is a landmark, providing very strong guidance on going for the long run for the market, saying long-term trading is good because this is providing stability into the market. That's step number one. Step number two is technology agnosticity. I think this is providing level playing field rules at the European level, which is helping the operators like we are to make steps into the right direction. And I would like also to give the example of the UK. Not anymore, it was mentioned already, not anymore in the EU, but nevertheless, we have a very good operation, very strong operation in the UK, where for the last years we have been developing very big projects together with a very collaborative approach on defining how we measure the risks and how we take the risks. I think that's the right direction to take and to move forward. And that's why, where in the UK, for example, we have the UK to build 2 nuclear power plants that are going to provide 7% of the needs of the country and balance all the efforts that we are also participating into renewables and offshore wind, for example. So that's, for me, that's the right way forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you also, everybody, for really keeping your remarks concise. Much appreciated. Nonetheless, we are still quite late. I will now open the floor to pre-registered comments, and I've grouped them according to the guiding questions that were circulated, and I think the table is more or less built in the order in which these are. And I'm going to just leave away names and only say countries or organizations so that we can maybe cut a few seconds off. Nonetheless, I'd be grateful if you could keep your remarks to under 2 minutes, please. And I will begin with the guiding question: what must be done by governments, utility industry, and key stakeholders to overcome existing barriers and rapidly advance solutions across infrastructure, policy, workforces, and institutions in the next 2 years? And I'll go first to Slovakia. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back to the projects of the common interest, which are the cross-border projects with significance for the EU infrastructure. And in this context, we would like to point out 2 projects focused on the electricity grid development and 1 project related to the hydrogen infrastructure. Again, connected networks, or the so-called ACON smart grids project, aims to foster the integration of the Czech and Slovak electricity markets, with aspiration to expand the interconnection of the markets in the region and thereby to improve the quality and security of supply in the border areas. The second is the Danube in-grid project, the objective of which is to strengthen interaction and integration between the Slovak and Hungarian electricity markets and to adopt smart grid technologies that should efficiently integrate the behavior and actions of all connected market users. Last but not least, the Central European Hydrogen Corridor, because there was not a lot of mentioning of Central Europe here. This is a project of gas transmission system operators of 4 countries, including Slovakia, with the aim of creating a hydrogen corridor in the Central European region. And also, to conclude very briefly, I would like to mention that apart from these big-scale projects, we see a meaning in providing investment aid also to lesser projects at the national level, applying the REPower EU instrument. This way, we are supporting notably the projects related to the modernization of transmission and distribution systems, new batteries and hydrogen electrolyzers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Slight departure from the chronology. I will jump over to Marco Arcelli now from Aquapower, and you have the floor because you have to leave very soon. If others have to leave very soon, please put your signs up so I know to whom I need to go first.
No,
so,
thanks
Marco,
a lot,
please.
Melinda, for acknowledging this with the disruption. I need to really catch the last flight to Riyadh tonight. Aquapower, for those who don't know it, is a Saudi national champion for renewable energy and energy transition. We have 55 gigawatt of capacity. We're the largest private desalination company in the world, supplying about 20-30% of the population in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the Emirates, and Oman. And we're one of the first movers, or the first mover in green hydrogen with the Neon Green Hydrogen project and the second project in Uzbekistan together with partners. My remark is really on then what can we do or what should we do? And I would like to focus more on something soft rather than the hard of financing and gridding in integration and so on that we heard. And I take the privilege of having moved from the global north to the global south. We operate in many countries in Africa, Central Asia, Southeast Asia. One of the things that surprised me moving to Saudi Arabia with Vision 2030 and everything that is going on in the Emirates with the big decarbonization projects that we have here, programs that we have here, but in reality is Uzbekistan. And I always take it as an example because I never would have thought moving from Europe, big utility, coming here and say, you know, what's the second biggest country in your portfolio is Uzbekistan, where we're investing $15 billion to deliver a decarbonization that will lower emissions and gas consumptions by 60% by 2030. And what I observe is really a few things. So the first one is speed. I always talk about not a trilemma, but a quadrilemma. So we have to add speed because we need to be fast. How do you do that? What I see in these countries that are moving fastest is leadership. And leadership in 2 forms. The first one is to have a vision, dialogue with investors to really say what we need on both sides, and then taking quick decisions. And on the other, part of these quick decisions is to accept and allow bilateral discussions. So you have tenders, yes, to make sure that you have the right cost at the end, but you have bilateral discussions that allow you to first move fast, and second, gain a scale and give visibility about a scale to do much more than the individual project. We heard before about people and the need for people. What we have done, for instance, in Uzbekistan, is we supported a technical academy that is basically graduating 200 people every year in a country that is elevating, developing skills to operate the power plants and the green hydrogen plants. So that's the second thing.
Marco,
the third thing...
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to be brief.
Yeah, it's where I wanted to conclude, in fact, is how we bring everybody together, because financing is the other point, and working in the global south, we have a lot of countries with twice the population of Saudi Arabia,
and a total installed capacity that is one power plant that we build in 2 years. So why does it not develop? And I think here the point is how you bring everybody together. So DFIs, often the development financing institution, we see that they take tenures of 10, 15 years. Why should a private investor take 30 years? You're there to de-risk. We work with partners. I talk to European companies, to companies from the global north, and they can say, come and invest with us on the equity side. And what I see is, yes, but all our pledges are really to invest in OECD countries, not non-OECD. Why? Because the rating agencies are judging our cash flow, and if it is from non-OECD, then it gets discounted more. So how are we going to solve that? We're trying to be an enabler, and I think that it takes a little bit of leadership from each one of us to come together and try to make it work.
Thank you very much. Glad that you stayed long enough to share those messages. And finance, in fact, is a very crucial topic that we will be addressing tomorrow as well. Unfortunately, you'll be in Riyadh by then, so we wish you a good trip. I will now return to the other side and go to Spain. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I want to focus my brief comments on investment from a public sector view. And while speaking about infrastructure for the energy transition, I think I need to record, as I did in the previous roundtable, that Spain has benefited greatly from policies and actions adopted in the context of the European Union. I'm going to share with you two brief facts. For the last months, and certainly from last summer, we've experienced very positive results in the form of zero or negative prices during the central hours of the day in the generation of electricity. And of course that renewables in Spain exceeded 50% of electricity generation for the first time last year. Of course, this is very good news for private consumers and industrial consumers, but we believe it adds an additional challenge on the supply side so that investment decisions can continue to be made as before. So this calls for action on the part of the public authorities, at least from the point of view of electricity generators, to design instruments that provide incentives for flexibility, storage, and the displacement of generation to other hours where they can receive a remuneration that allows them to achieve minimum profitability. Of course, eliminating the risk of promoting renewable projects is not a question, but we understand that we must help ensure that investments in decarbonization continue, and for this we need concrete actions. I'm going to stress two particular actions. We believe that we need to continue to enhance and grow the weight of the renewable sector's value chain in the national industrial metrics, which is already fundamental in Spain. We believe this is one of the main positive impacts of the energy transition in any country, and certainly in Spain. And of course, we are willing to enhance partnerships with other actors in the value chain, whether national or international. We're very keen on that. And of course, it is essential that we ensure that investments in the electricity grid, both in distribution and transmission, take place promptly, allowing the system to continue integrating new renewable energy. And we're confident in the tools that we are designing and will put in place as soon as possible to create incentives for renewable energy generators to continue to install additional renewable power. And I will give, finally, to conclude, perhaps some examples of the initiatives that are proposed to continue to grow the percentage of renewable energy in our energy matrix, enabling and strengthening bilateral power purchase and sale agreements, attracting demand to the central hours of the day where prices are zero or very low, increasing storage capacity, both centralized and distributed, to allow individuals and companies to shift demand, installing electrolysis, finally, for the production of renewable hydrogen, where we believe that Spain can be a very relevant actor. I may just recall that 20% of all installed capacity in green hydrogen in Europe is based in Spain, and we will continue to make it grow with the help of partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll go straight to the Clean Energy Ministerial, if I may. And if everybody can shorten their remarks even more, that'd be great, because people are starting to have to get
yes,
to their questions.
and just to start by thanking Irina and UNEZA for inviting the Clean Energy Ministerial to this very important discussion. I think the short answer to your question, how can governments, industry stakeholders work to get, achieve this, is by working together. And this is a very good first step into it, because it's not just about talking to one another once in a while. It's about building those relationships to be able to, as EDF mentioned, get to understand each other. But most importantly, get to understand how they each bring a piece of the puzzle through the different levers they have to address the different aspects. And this is exactly what the SAM was developed to do, to build those relationships, to build those work streams that can start addressing the issues from all the angles of all the stakeholders. We cover all these aspects, transport, industry, power, but we also address different dimensions, whether it's the technology, the policy, but also the socioeconomic aspects, the skill sets, the inclusivity aspects. And what we try to do is to, A, build a dialogue so that we can identify all these issues, but more importantly, build the coalitions where the stakeholders can then sit down and develop plans to actually implement actions in all these aspects. And so what we've been doing is supporting political ambition through bringing concrete actions. For example, we helped the UAE's COP28 presidency to deliver on 3 of their priorities on hydrogen, on shipping, and on industrial decarbonization. We're now working with Brazil's G20 presidency to come with concrete outcomes to support their priorities, and one of them is specifically on the power sector and how to attract that green investments by looking at how the different stakeholders can all commit to working through the various work streams on achieving aspects such as grid investments, smarting and modernizing the grids, storage, demand flexibility, demand planning and forecasting, but also issues of skills and so forth. So I think, in a nutshell, we have been building the partnerships. We're working with regulators, financial institutions, project developers, many of them around the table today, and we're very happy to have you and UNEZA join us in Foz do Iguaçu in Brazil in October to see how we can bring the utilities aspect to the discussions as well.
Thank you very much. So, Director Gonul, I think an offer here from another collaborative endeavor on the policy side to join forces. I'll go now to Australia, if I may.
Thank you, Melinda. And I will keep this one short. Not just do we need to work together, but I think the key thing from a government perspective is we need to work together in a strategic and coordinated way. So across government, utility, industry, the whole clean energy sector need to be thinking about how we're really working it through the different investment issues, community issues, and the regulatory issues as well. Just a quick example on the coordinated way in Australia. So we have our Australian Energy Market Operator, and they do an integrated system plan. The latest one said we needed 10,000 kilometres of new grids, new transmission infrastructure by 2050. That triggered government to create a $20 billion fund called Rewiring the Nation. There's concessional financing to make sure the grid is being built with the least cost to consumers. So it's a direct result of working with our market operators, having a strategic plan, coordinating policy around it, and it resulting in a lower cost option going forward. But it's not just capital. We have spoken a lot about investment around this table. It is the social, the regulatory, the supply chains, and the skills. So we need to be working together with communities. It's not just on government and politicians to build social license. It's on all of us to make sure that those that are hosting infrastructure are on board with those projects. It's also about cooperating to work on the environmental frameworks, ways to de-risk the approvals processes, to reduce the bottlenecks. And so again, Australia is working with our utilities and other clean energy developers to make sure we streamline those processes. And then it's the workforce across the supply chain. So it's not just the electricians, it's not just the ability to build the grids, but it's that whole piece from the manufacturing all the way through to deployment and operations. But my final point is just on the needing to cooperate internationally. And for us, we have that focus on the Pacific and Southeast Asia. And I'm really honoured to be sitting with my Indonesian colleagues today in particular. Because we know in Southeast Asia there is insufficient grid infrastructure to see that build out of the renewables that's needed. And the ASEAN Energy Outlook notes that energy demand will likely triple in this region by 2050. So my call on this group today is to think about how you can be supporting the infrastructure needs in the Southeast Asia region in particular, because it's critical if we're going to achieve our climate goals. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Canada's chair appears to be empty. Is that right? Yes. So then we will go straight to Indonesia, which dovetails well.
Thank you, Melinda. In case of Indonesia, Indonesia is blessing with various distributed and abundance in terms of renewable energy resources so far. But the challenge is that we are the archaeological country. So the challenge is how to link between central of the renewable energy resources and the central of the demand. We have made two approaches on this. The first is to develop so-called super green, and the second is to develop the industrial park, or even the combination between the first and the second. For the first one, the super grid development, we have made the roadmap on this. Last year, we have made the interconnection between inter-island in Sumatra, the western part of Indonesia. So the target is how to connect the 5 main islands of the country: Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Nusa Tenggara. This is the target up to 2050. Without having connection with these 5 main islands, so the target of the net zero will be impossible in our analysis in this part. So that's the first one. So we are connecting all those main islands. And the second part is to bring the industry to the area that renewable energy resources is available. For example, we made the green industrial park in northern part of Kalimantan. There are huge resources in terms of hydro with something like 10 gigawatt over there. Now it's being constructed for the first 1.3 gigawatt and bringing the industry, cementing industry to bring to this area. So the challenge for us so far is the regulation. Now we are trying to see to have the breakthrough in the, this is not new probably in European countries or in some other countries, to have the power wheeling. This is the idea how to utilize the infrastructure, the transmission, to be developed by the private, and then also to utilize this. But by regulation, this is the challenge within us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to our second guiding question, which essentially addresses a paradigm shift. We've been talking about a ramp up that is really unprecedented and requires a total rethink about energy and infrastructure. So I'd like to ask those who pre-registered comments to speak to that, beginning with the UK. Please.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for staying on. I wanted to start out with some positive thoughts about this. So believe it or not, 21% of the UK's power generation at this moment is coming from solar, which might surprise you, but of course solar in the UK is very distributed, and therefore you need to have good grid connections. We have made some big steps in the last year or so to try and slash the grid connectivity from 5 years to 6 months. 21% is not far off the 29%, which has been generated with the help of Masdar and SSE from wind. But we have 14% at the moment generated by nuclear, thank you, EDF principally, and 14% imported. So we have those big interconnectors, although maybe not part of the European Union anymore, but a lot of connectivity across the European Union overall, which means 67% of our energy at the moment is zero carbon. Not as much as Monday, when we hit a 19 grams per kilowatt hour carbon total, which was our record ever. So here's some really good news stories, here's some solutions, but that's the UK. And this needs to be it's a global problem, it's a global challenge, global solutions. So I wanted to just draw attention to 2 global initiatives which are really important for us to lean into, which bring government and industry together. The first, both of them launched at COP26 in Glasgow 2 years ago. The first is the power breakthrough, which is really great that IRENA are now the facilitator of that, and that will help bring these utilities together, and I hope that UNEZA will be a really key player in that power breakthrough. And the second, which my colleague Marcus over here will talk about later on, is the Greening Grid Initiative, which is a vehicle to bring together leading actors from governments, finance, regulators, and the private sector to deploy grids globally more effectively. Marcus himself is an example of public partnership being from the national grid, but now having to move paper instead of electrons in government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we go next to Denmark, please.
Thank you. So only 2 minutes. I'll try to do it in only 2 points then. First of all, I mean, Denmark is, of course, extremely committed to doing something extremely fast in this area. And I think the first thing that comes up is really barriers. And some of the barriers in our countries is linked to legislation. So what we've done there is basically been working extremely close with industry to find those barriers and get rid of them. So we set up this task force, which was really led by industry, and gave them the task to say, okay, find the barriers that are standing in the way of solar and wind deployment and to get fossil fuel out of heating in houses. And they came up with a very, very long list, which they handed in a month ago. And now the government is looking at all of these suggestions, one by one, implement them to make sure that speed just go up. So that was the first one about speed and the barriers. The second one is really about risk. I mean, I think there's been quite a lot of discussion about sort of we need to de-risk all the projects. And in many ways, when people use the word de-risk, it means sort of move the risk to the government. And in some way, I think we need to be slightly more innovative. So for instance, we talked about the hydrogen. So there's just been a major political agreement 2 weeks ago about green hydrogen, the financing of the infrastructure there. And what was done was really trying to see how do we come up with a scheme where, of course, government steps in and pay the infrastructure, but it's done in a way where industry has to pre-book 40% of the capacity in the pipeline before it's even built. And by doing so, that sort of will allow the government to invest. And secondly, there's also been introduced a rather flexible way of setting the tariff, which would mean that the first, 10, 15 years, there would be huge deficits in these pipelines that would be paid by government, of course, on the premise that that money will be returned after the 15 years. So this way of sort of making sure that the risks are shared in a way which is not just transferred through the government. So those would be my 2 points. Really focus on getting industry involved in finding the barriers, and then find a new way to sort of share risk, and then have very, very quick rollout. Thank you.
Clearly, that is exactly what UNEZA does intend to do, as we heard from the study. So thank you very much for underlining the importance of those. I go now to the Global Renewables Alliance, please.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Huge congratulations to the UK government for their solar power. It is surprising, but it's true what renewables can do. And also to the Spanish representative, again, congratulations for your initiatives on the negative pricing and curtailment. I'd love to talk to you afterwards about that. So the Global Renewables Alliance, we represent wind, solar, geothermal and hydropower on the generation side, and also long-duration energy storage and green hydrogen. And I welcome my friend Luke from EDF's comments about flexibility. Of course, we do need storage and, importantly, grids. We're a proud partner of UNEZA. Grids have been ignored and undervalued for too long. They're indeed the circulation system, if you like, the veins of the energy transition. Commissioner Simpson mentioned there's 3,000 gigawatts globally waiting in connection queues, which would help us a long way towards the tripling of renewables. We need a massive increase in grids, both new infrastructure, but utilising existing infrastructure. So energy system optimisation, no grids always better than new grids. I'd also like to mention co-chair Martin Pibworth, your comments about value versus cost, not just for renewables, but for grids. There's a lot there, and it's extremely important to take that away. So we, as the GRA, yesterday, with IRENA, launched a public-private campaign called Time for Action, which focuses on 3 key enablers. And again, co-chair Yassim Tabet, you mentioned these. These enablers are the same for renewable build-out as they are for grids, which is financing, permitting, and supply chains. On financing, Director from IRENA, you mentioned this enormous increase required, 368 billion per year, this increase already this year to 720 billion, so a tripling of investment in grids. And as you know around the table, grid build-out takes longer often than renewable build-out. We need to start grids before the renewables. And the main reason for that is permitting. So permitting, especially high voltage distribution, transmission, requires social acceptance and a license to operate. And finally, on supply chains, and The GRA are very proud to be a co-author of the paper that UNEZA developed on supply chains. And again, it mirrors exactly the challenges we face in renewables, minerals and materials, manufacturing, logistics, and as mentioned, skilled workforce. So those constraints for supply chains of grids and renewables, and as you mentioned on the video, we can go far together, and I think together renewables and grids do need to work together for the energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One last input now on paradigm shift from Siemens Middle East.
Yeah, thank you very much, Melinda, and thank you again for having me. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Utilities for Net Zero Alliance is really an unprecedented platform where utilities, technology providers, and governments are uniting globally to achieve net zero targets. To benefit fully from the global expertise at UNEZA and to accelerate the energy transition, we must act on two crucial fronts, and Bruce, you just mentioned one of them. First, utilities must assess and maximize their existing infrastructure capability through methodological grid assessments, upgrades, and digitalization. Utilities can really enhance efficiency and extend their infrastructure's lifespan, contributing to CO2 savings. There are tremendous improvements that can be applied to existing infrastructure. Digitalization will enable the deployment of technologies like digital twins, which enhances grid control and sustainability, and also paves the way for AI, which will make grids even more reliable and efficient. But digitalization also yields its own danger too. It's a little bit overlooked, but extremely important that cybersecurity becomes a top priority. Preventing hacks and catastrophic blackouts must be built into any upgrades or also new infrastructure. And on the second front, UNEZA must introduce a comprehensive roadmap for utility transition. This involves establishing standards and policies such as procurement standards, grid performance optimization, risk assessment, and also capacity building. It should also include the global phase-out of fluorinated greenhouse gases, such as sulfur hexafluoride, known as SF6 gas, in, for example, medium voltage switchgear. SF6 is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. It's 23,000 times more impactful than CO2 over a century. The technology to get rid of those fluorinated greenhouse gases in electric panels exists and can actually be deployed right now. So in conclusion, by assessing the existing infrastructure, implementing robust standards and also policies, and investing in grid upgrades, we can pave the way for a sustainable and resilient energy future. Siemens is proud to be a member of UNEZA and is committed to contributing to the mission of achieving net zero emissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We now move on to our third guiding question. We still have 4 interventions left. We also have about 4 minutes left until past. It would be wonderful if we could squeeze these in to that amount of time, because then we would only be, so to speak, 10 minutes too long, since we started 35 minutes too late. So if you do all the math on that, then thank you very much. But anyway, our third guiding question is the following. What is required to unlock the utility sector's global energy transition potential to target and remove those structural, regulatory, and financial impediments that we have been talking about? And I will begin, if I may, with the Minister from Sao Tome and Principe.
Thank you very much, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to express on behalf of Sao Tome and Principe at this great event. In view of the challenges and barriers in the structural, regulatory, and financial context known to all of us, there is a need for less developed countries to change the paradigm in order to meet the real energy transition. Sao Tome and Principe has invested in the training and capacity building of its staff in the technical, legal, and financial areas, in the preparation of studies that allow mapping of the potential and renewable energy sources, and also in the elaborations plan and strategies for short, medium, and long term.
Also, focusing on the implementation of specific regulations as well as the creation of measures that include tax and customs incentives to encourage private investments in renewable energy. I believe that in order to be successful in accelerating the energy transition, tripling renewable energy, it's necessary that the financing partners turn the procedures for accessing financing more flexible, less bureaucratic. We are convinced that through these actions, we will be able to unblock the barriers that hinder the global energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to the Green Grids Initiative, please.
Thank you. I won't waste much time about telling you about the need for grids. I think we've got that. But I'll just say there's no transition without transmission. What the Green Grids are working on, and we're working on 3 key areas which I think really will help enable the transition. One is around best practice, particularly around policy, regulation, and how we can share that from countries and organisations that are ahead of the curve to those that are further behind. We've developed a tool called the Electricity Transition Playbook, which is a guide and a training piece for particularly for policymakers and regulators to help them navigate their own transitions and build holistic electricity plans. And I'd like to thank Irina, who've been helping us with that. The second area we need to concentrate on is finance. It's been mentioned a few times. One of the things that we're working on with IFIs and MMDBs is how we can bring greater access to climate finance for grid projects to help de-risk those, then to help attract private finance into those projects to make them more bankable, and particularly working in Global South regions to do that. And the third area I'd like to stress is supply chain and skills. Again, that's mentioned, but it's no good having the finance in place or the frameworks in place if you don't have the people to build, design, operate and run. And so we're very pleased to be working with UNEZA, IRENA and GRA on putting together an action plan around supply chains in particular to do just that. Because, to quote Bruce and GRA, the time for action is now, and there's no transition without transmission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now over to Enra.
So thank you. I just want to use the opportunity to talk about another project which might fit very nice to Irina. Some of you might know this. It's the Global Power Systems Transformation. So what we have done over the last couple of years to see how can we bring the systems operators together. So we had a systems operator from many of countries here, so starting with the UK with the National Grid, Australia, AMEO, Ireland, Aerogrid, Denmark, EnergyNet, Calais in California, ERCOT in Texas. So the idea is really bring the systems operator together, link them also with some of the research organizations like Imperial College or NREL to really link this and see what can we do together. How can we change? How can we learn from each other? How can we exchange this information to accelerate the energy transition? So what GPSC does also works in countries like Indonesia, India, South Africa, Colombia, and Peru, Vietnam. Control room of the futures, on best practices, how we change this, on workforce training. So we have some of the engineers coming to all our organizations and changing, and also smart inverters, just to name a few. So we see that this is very important. We talk about a lot of the policies, but also going into the ground, working with the systems operator, exchange what they've learned to really accelerate the energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the person I thought was the fourth is in fact not one of those who pre-registered a comment. So we will leave it there and wrap up our Ministerial Roundtable. Before we applaud for UNEZA and for all those who have spoken, let me just attempt the very, very briefest of summaries. Our chair has left us, so it does fall to me, but the good thing is this is going to be extremely short. So you know, we just heard there's no transition without transmission. I would say paraphrase that and say there is no transition without connections. And obviously infrastructure physically is all about connections. But what we've heard today is that it is crucial to interconnect policymakers and industry, utilities, those represented in this new alliance, in a pragmatic and effective way to remove barriers, to ramp up financing, to get the kind of legislative frameworks in place that can de-risk simply by providing stability and predictability. And, of course, to address issues like human resources. And when I think about connections, I also very much think about connections between the countries that are represented here and those countries of the global south that we have mentioned so often as needing so badly the financing that often flows to the global north and to the west. So that said, I would say I think we've had a very productive dialogue that established all kinds of connections, and I hope that we can continue in that kind of a fashion to make UNEZA a success and to find those kind of partnerships and collaborative efforts that really bring this crucial project forward, because we will not get to the tripling up goal nor to net zero unless we have that massive build out that was described. So with that, I close the session with a very warm round of applause to all who have spoken here today. Thank you. Enjoy your evening. Hope to see you tomorrow.